they can do with AirPods today anyways. So
Okay. I hope this works out okay. I'm for some reason you're coming through on my speakers on my laptop, which is okay, but I mostly am concerned if I sound like I'm in a tin can or not, because that's annoying. No one wants to listen to that.
you sound all right to me, at least through
Okay.
the AirPods. And I mean, that's the other thing I like about this is Adobe does a lot of cleanup. So
Okay. Perfect.
it'll do what it can to, make the audio sound good without sounding tin
Okay.
canned. All right. Well, welcome back to Scouting Stuff. It has been a hot minute since I have recorded an episode out of an inadvertent summer break, let's call it. But I'm back and I'm still Scouting Ken. And it's not just me solo. There are two of us today. And on the other end of the internet, and about halfway across Canada, is Steph Runday. Hi, Steph.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. By way of introduction, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So, as you said, my name's Steph, and I've been working with Scouts Canada since 2019. Um, I started with the safety team and am now the Associate Director of Relationships and Dispute Resolution.
Okay, cool. So those are the people I hope I never have to email, but it's good that you're there when we need you.
We're here. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's one of those it's like insurance. I hope I never have to, but also, okay. Well, so you actually, so this kind of, to fill in the story here for the listener, this kind of came about circuitously. So, Ambar reached out about doing a couple of episodes later on in the year as, like let's go popcorn and all of the rest of this stuff. And I just kind of mentioned in passing that I've been dormant for the last couple of months and really struggling to find a couple of things, right? The co-hosts for one, but then also just, time and topics. And so I pitched it to her. It's like, hey, if you know anybody your end who wants to come on and discuss things, happy to have the exclusive Accommodations next again. And you responded in like a day, which is awesome. And your topic, it's funny. We'll get to the topic in a minute, but it's funny that what you pitched as a topic is what you pitched, because we have my scout group has a problem, and it's a good problem, but it's also an unprecedented problem.
What's the problem, Ken? Don't keep us waiting. I want to know.
I thought we were doing really well the last couple of years when we had 24, 26 venture scouts. That's a very large venture company and a problem to have. Our registered number for next year for venturers is 36.
36. That's huge.
36 venturers. That's more than we've ever had. I don't know if any venture company in Canada has ever done that.
Teenagers get a hard rap, but how do you get 30 of them to come out and be active and participate? Good job, you.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've had excellent retention rates over the last few years. And there's a whole story about that, and people who've been following the podcast for a while have probably heard enough of it to kind of put the whole thing together. But yeah, it's a good problem to have, but at the same time, it's an interesting problem to have. But we have a WhatsApp community set up for all the scouters. Basically, it's like a online group committee, in addition to the in-person and virtual meetings that we dedicate to the actual group committee and business affairs of the group. But yeah, just last night, the chat kind of blew up because you have 36 registered events. How do you even want to approach this? Do you want to speak the company? And then at some point, someone chimed in with concerns about what about what even is the approach to that scouters use in a venture company? And I seem to be the only one not currently on vacation. So I chimed in to the effect we have a small core of dedicated venture advisors. And in a circle of life thing, one of the advisors was my venture advisor when I was a vet myself. But anyways, now he's a vent advisor with two of my daughters, some others. But I was the one online, so I kind of just chimed in. I was like, well, I mean, look, it's ventures. The way that we've traditionally approached the advisor role, the scouter role, is we're very hands-on. we'll intervene when we absolutely need to. But in general, it is meant for, and the program calls for, the youth to really just plan and run their own, whatever activities they want to get up to. And we are, as the name implies, there to advise. We're there to, we'll ask questions and we'll make suggestions, but we're not really there to facilitate.
Totally.
And someone came back. The question is like, well, but what about like, youth with like special needs, or like, are we expecting the first years to be able to be able to handle planning their own activities? And I mean, I kind of came back with the answer. It's like, well, those are two different questions, right? Like at the end of the day, we're talking about 14 to 17-year-olds, and it's not unreasonable to expect for the general case, for the general 14 to 17-year-old youth, it's not unreasonable to expect a certain degree of agency and a certain degree of capability to, yeah, it's an idea, plan an idea, and carry out an idea. Now, if there are youth with very particular special needs, then absolutely we'll take a more involved approach, or we can look at what our options are for that. But yeah, in general, the events are supposed to run their own, even if they're brand new to the venture you're in.
Okay.
And that's a good thing.
Right.
But it just, it kind of made me chuckle because it's like, that was the topic that you had pitched, was that whole concept of like some quick and easy wins for accessibility.
Right.
So, by way of a meandering story, that is the topic that you had suggested that we discuss. And I think it's actually really a topic, especially like right now, because this is that last month of summer, groups are dealing with the registrations, and we're starting to look at, okay, well, what is going to be the composition of my beaver colonies and my cub packs and my scout troops? And do I have any youth in the mix who I am going to have to, make certain accommodations for, or have certain accessibility questions that I need answering? So this is so incredibly tiny. And A, thank you for suggesting it. And B, if I've at all failed to adequately describe what you had in mind, what did you
No,
have in
not
mind?
at all. No, no. I did sense that you were struggling a little bit there with searching for the right words, and you landed with special needs. Do you feel comfortable with that terminology?
I'll cop to using archaic language.
Okay.
It's these are they're the terms I grew up with, and to be honest, I don't always
Sure.
have the mental energy to devote to like being completely on top of the absolute newest terminology to use. So I'll write
Sure.
myself as something of a cave dweller in that regard. But
I'm not calling you a cave dweller, Kenneth. That's no way.
no, but that's me. I'll
Okay.
happily cop to being backwards in certain things, and it's okay. I mean,
Okay.
I'm sure there are probably better words I could have chosen, but that's the word I have. And at the end of the day,
Yeah.
and it's not like we don't have, like, we did have youth in our group right now who are, for example, autistic.
Mm-hmm.
The one youth is essentially non-verbal or mostly non-verbal autistic.
Okay.
Believe he just joined our scout troop.
Yeah.
And
Well,
along the way, you've had some other youth who's um, it's, they're like caregivers that are essentially like one to one with them the whole time.
yeah.
So
So as we talk today, I'm probably going to say like youth with accessibility needs or youth with accommodation needs or maybe youth with disabilities, be it visible or invisible. I might say youth requiring accommodations or youth with diverse or different abilities or learning exceptionalities. And
yeah,
that's my way of focusing more on not necessarily so much their differences, but what they need in order to be lifted up to be supported to succeed in scouting. So that's my
yeah,
approach. I'm just letting you know that I use different terms, and
it's totally
uh,
fine.
yeah, they're all interchangeable for me.
Exactly. You're being more granular than I am. You have more
Okay.
buckets.
All right. I'll zoom out a bit. So yeah,
Ah, it's all good.
Amber, when she reached out, she said, I know that you've been working in this space and Skylar Ken might be interested in having on the podcast and talking a bit about accessibility and accommodations with a scouting lens applied to it. Because like we're all volunteers, right?
Right.
We're youth led. We don't have limitless pockets for accommodations that cost money, that sort of thing. But we want everybody to be included. So I was like, absolutely, Amber, put me in touch with Scout or Ken, and we'll talk about it for certain. So
Well,
I'm
and
just
more
really
than
excited.
that, yeah, well, and more than that too, because at the end of the day, you point out we are all volunteers, and we're all bringing ourselves to the program to the best of our
Right.
abilities, and we're all there to facilitate the best program we know how to for the youth that are showing up.
Yeah.
But you know, I'm a computer nerd, right? Like I'm a computer engineer.
Okay.
I
I
don't
respect
really
that.
have a ton of training with, in the realms of how to deal with, yeah, like you say, youth who do require certain
Yeah.
accommodations, right?
So
It's
if I
not,
can
they
ask
didn't teach
you,
me that in C++ programming.
no, that's fair, or Java or Perl or any of those. That speaks to my age, maybe.
Exactly.
Um, yeah. So, if I can pose a question to you, and this isn't an interrogation, I'm not attacking you or anything like that, but
Well, go on.
um, how do you approach that conversation with parents? Like, do you find that it's very awkward to start that conversation? How do you let them know that you're a safe and reasonable guy and you're doing the best that you can?
In my year, first couple of years, it probably would have been more awkward, but I think it kind of helped that
Mm.
we did have the first time we had a youth, and again, I believe nonverbal autistic youth join the Beaver Academy. And this would have been alongside my eldest daughter, who is now going into her office.
Okay.
So, it was a while ago, but that that child had an adult caregiver that was basically one to one with him.
Right.
And and I mean that was just, that was something that had already been pre-existing that, his parents had set up. Um, this guy, the caregiver had been working with this kid for at least a year, probably two, by the time that
Mhm.
he joined Beavers. And
Mhm.
he was constantly present, and he was basically just there to be with this kid and help him take part. And it worked really, really well, actually. And I mean, he was just generally a helpful guy to have around, the caregiver, right? Like he would pitch in. Um, Under other circumstances, he would have been exactly the sort of person I would have, tapped on the shoulder and said, "Have you ever considered becoming a scouter?"
Sure.
Right?
So,
Like, just great. And
yeah.
so nowadays, in the handful of cases, and we haven't had too many youth come through that are in, that require um, additional measures.
Mhm.
But for the handful that have, it's been a much easier conversation because, yeah, we can just ask. It's like, okay, well, like, do they have a caregiver? What are their requirements? I'm perfectly fine asking those questions. And a lot of times, too, their parents are very upfront with us to begin with. And they'll just come
Right.
right out and say, hey, just so you know, here's where my kid's at.
Right. It's helpful when parents come to the table and ready to communicate as well, but sometimes there kind of needs to be an invitation from the group or like the section scouters side to say like I'm safe. I'm going to like hear what you have to say because you and your family and your youth, you guys are the subject matter experts on what it takes to help your child succeed in scouting. So I'll open the door and see if you walk through it, and if that's not your jam, then we'll make other adjustments, but it's always easier when the parents are um they show up to participate in those conversations as well because like they are the experts in what will what the strong suits of their child are, what the challenges are. um and also they usually have like a lot of youth who have disabilities or accessibility needs or needs for accommodations. They already have something implemented, like an individual support plan at school. And wouldn't it be amazing if, as a scouter, you could say um, to a parent, "Is there a support plan that they use at school? Because if we use the same one, it would probably help the youth out. This child who needs accommodations, it would help out if we have consistent ways of approaching things, and we're on the same ground here, and we're reacting in a similar way. So sometimes those are implemented in scouting. So it's just transferred from school to scouting, and parents will readily hand those over and say, "Yes, please. Consistency is key." Um, so
Absolutely.
yeah, if a um like a support worker is at disposal at school and they put together a support plan to be used at school and at home, why not also scouting? And that's something that can be done for free. It doesn't cost anything, right? Scouts Canada
Mhm.
does have a a way to help out financially when it comes to providing accommodations for those who need accommodations in order to participate meaningfully, but it might cost money. So, for example, someone who might need an American Sign Language interpreter to come with them for a camping event or something like that. Um, there's a process to go through there to help that family be reimbursed or that group to be reimbursed for um, the payment of having an ASL interpreter come to that event or that activity. So there's different ways to include people, but most of the time, like I said, inclusivity, accessibility, there are measures that can be taken to that don't cost a dime. They don't require paperwork or anything like that or exchanges of receipts, which I really like about Scouts Canada. It's one of my favorite things is that by and large, we're all very inclusive and we want kids to participate in a meaningful way. So what barriers can we remove to help them do that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you talk about like, and that's an awesome suggestion, right? Is that question of like, hey, do they already have like a plan that's in place at a school? That's a
Hmm.
really good question. And I make a note to put that in the show notes. Um, Actually, maybe at the end of this, I'll get you to like send me an email with like, a lot of this summarized,
Totally.
or
Sure
I'll just
thing.
get AI to summarize it for me. One of the two. Both.
One of the
Both is
two.
good. It made me think of I used to approach the issue of doing overnight camps with Beaver Scouts because like I got back into I mean I joke that I kind of just joined at 5 and never left, and that's mostly true, but like my involvement with the program definitely shifted when my other kids wanted to start taking part in the program. So when my eldest was 5 and she became a Beaver Scout, that was right around the time the Canadian Path, when we still called it that, happened.
Okay.
And the whole the whole program changed, but the Beaver program changed in one particular decision they made because before then, it was kind of, I guess it was like, this is going back to like 2011, 2012, 2015. Before Canadian Path really came in, it used to be the case, at least as our group interpreted the rules that National set out, that you had to have basically, like, if you wanted to do any kind of overnight activity in Beaver Scouts, you had to have basically a one-to-one, like, one parent for each beaver, which was hugely restrictive. And whether that was always the rule or whether we just misinterpreted the rule, that restriction went away about the time that my eldest joined beavers. And but the way that I would always field the question when parents would ask, like, hey, do we need to come along on this camp that you have planned, right? Whether it's a museum sleepover, whether they're going to go, rent a camp property and stay in cabins, or it's staying in as one summer event that is, always out of tents. But that was always the question that parents would ask, hey, do I need to be there with my kid? And my answer back to them was always, well, you don't need to be there, but you know your kid better than I do. So
Hmm.
it really comes down to what's the temperament of the youth, right? Do you
Hmm.
think, as their parent, that they'll be okay without you? If yes, then no, you don't need to come along. And if
Yeah.
no, come along.
Yeah. And I mean, that speaks to what volunteers have the capacity uh, to, to work with and what is, not realistic to think that like ratio won't be impacted if we designate one specific scouter to one specific youth who has a tendency to run away. Like that's not safe, right? So what do we do in that case? How do we accommodate for the two scouter rule? How do we accommodate for ratio with the rest of the youth who have not run away? And so that can put the youth and scouters in a really precarious situation, right? So in that case, that's kind of an extreme, but it's an extreme that we see often enough or we hear about often enough, and it does cause conflict within the group. Because I don't know, group commissioners, scouters, they're kind of left like, what do I do here? And to that I say, reach out to the parents, let them know what's going on, and let them know that that youth would really benefit and requires a one-on-one support person, which the group is just not equipped and not ready to like not ready, but not equipped to meet that request. And so parents can attend as a support person. That's an accommodation that doesn't cost anything, right? Um, so that means that that parent can attend with the intent to only support their child. Doesn't mean that they need to sign up as a scouter. It doesn't mean that they have to do other scouting activities. It means that they are the support person just for their child.
And so that's an important thing that I wanted to clarify because that was the first question that came to my mind. And I think you addressed it, but let's just call it out specifically because it used to be, maybe still is, the case. I actually haven't dived into like BPNP in a couple of years, at least on this topic.
Right.
Mostly I'm just looking at stuff like knives. Because I deal with the
Knives.
older youth and they want to know about knives and axes
Yeah.
and all that good stuff. But it used to be the case that BPNP stated that Eric wanted to be Bill. It was like after about 3 meetings, I had to have the conversation about becoming a scouter.
Yeah. Um,
So if we're specifically saying that we're carving out an exception in this case, and it would be great to carve out an exception in this case when there are accessibility and accommodation needs that the parent is there to assist with. That's great. But it's just good to clarify that point for the sake of
yeah. So
clarifying it because
yeah, I mean, I have a I love BP&P. I'm a really objective person and I love having rules to follow. And I shouldn't
me
call
too.
them rules, but that's in some cases that's what they are. But it's like how to play this game. I'm the rule
Yeah.
person when we bust out the board games and everyone's like, "Oh God, here's stuff." Um, but if we go to the volunteer screening requirements in DPMP, this falls like that accommodating a youth who needs a support person falls under the category of parents or other adults attending regular meetings or day outings, not helping scouters, not helping other youth. They don't need to complete an application. They don't need an interview. They don't need to provide references. They do need to sign the code of conduct annually. They don't need a PRC or a VSS. They do need to have their role explained to youth. So, in other words, as an example, uh, Beavers, everybody, Steph is here to help her son or her daughter. She's not a scouter and she's only here for her son or her daughter. And I would also, in that role, have to be supervised with youth. So I'm not a scouter. I'm just there for my child. And that doesn't require an interview or onboarding or anything like that, but it does require signing of the code of conduct annually.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
and it's good to know what the process is there because yeah, I mean, I definitely want groups to be able to find ways to enable parents to help out in these sorts of cases, especially. Um,
absolutely. But, we recognize too that programming, like the quality of programming, that can't be at risk because it's expected that two scouters focus their attention on one youth to provide the support that they need. We like
Yeah.
a lot of our groups, it just simply don't have the ratio. They don't have the volunteer capacity to provide that kind of support. So if we can leverage parents and say we really want to support this your child to succeed in scouting, and having you there for every activity is what we need for support for right now, and then we can review in a couple of weeks and see how things go. But for right now, this child is running away. We don't have capacity to go running after them and to ensure their safety, so you really need to be there. And I think that
Yeah.
that's a really reasonable ask.
It is absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that some scouters might be a little bit cautious or a little bit weary of telling parents that like this is what we need. Um and on the flip side of that, some parents are also really cautious about approaching scouters with what they know their children to need. So in examples where youth might have auditory processing delays, they might need a little bit of extra time to process instructions one step at a time, two steps at maximum. Whereas I know with scouting, I know sometimes like I've gone to camps and maybe this speaks for my intelligence level, I don't know. But the contact scouter or the scouter is in charge is like everyone needs to make sure that their day packs are packed with this, and the other thing. And I'm like, oh dang. Like imagine being a youth with an auditory processing disability, and it's just a matter of making sure that we're taking into account everybody's needs. and how everybody is able to meaningfully participate. So that's an example of another free accommodation that can be made where a parent might feel a little bit cautious or a little bit weary of approaching a contact scouter to say, hey, my kid has an auditory processing disability and they really would benefit from having one step at a time instructions. That does require a little bit of extra patience and a little bit of understanding, but that's all that accommodation requires, right? So that's another way that we can really meaningfully improve the participation of youth with perhaps some invisibility or invisible disabilities, not invisibility,
Mm.
disability. That would be crazy.
That would
And
be X-Men. And
yeah.
well, yeah, it's funny. My brain went in like two ways simultaneously,
Okay.
because I'm entirely too online, and so the first thing that I thought of was, this one meme that I saw making the rounds a while ago, which is, there are two kinds of people in this world: those who can draw inferences from incomplete information,
Mhm.
and that's it. That's the meme. Um,
Okay. Yeah.
uh, right?
Yeah.
And some people can't, right? And so they're like, "What's the joke there?" And the people who, other people who can, they get it, right? It's, oh, right, those who cannot, obviously. But so, I like those sorts of things because they're like a good mental check. It's like, oh, Brett, shoot, I do that automatically, but there must be people out there who don't. Okay,
Yeah.
good to think about. But then also, it got me thinking that, every time because I mean, we do that, like we'll have a meeting, say before a camp, right? And we'll go through and we'll review all the things that you should have in your mess kit and other things that you should pack in your backpack and blah, blah, blah. But we also send out lists. It was actually something, whether it's a list that we're handing out at the meeting or it's going out on
Brilliant.
Scouts Tracker to all the parents' emails. There's
That's an
always
accommodation.
something
Good job, Scottish.
tangible. Right? And it's funny because like we've just been doing that like forever. And you almost don't really when it's something that you've been doing forever, you almost don't really think about it. But then you calling it out here and it's like, oh, I guess there must be scout groups that don't necessarily do that all the time.
Yeah. I
Interesting.
mean, it could be considered a redundancy contingency plan to
Yeah.
ensure that everything goes off without a hitch. But you can also apply, an accommodation, accessibility, inclusivity lens to it and say, yeah, in the case that someone is at the meeting and it's just kind of too much information, they're going to get a list. And so they can use that list to their benefit. It's another free accommodation example.
It is.
Uh,
Well, and I mean, and two, like, maybe it's just because I've been dealing with, especially Beaver Scouts, right? Because I have 4 kids and
mhm.
they've all gone through at least Beaver Scouts. My oldest my oldest is going over his second is going into venture. Well, she's in venture. She's like her second or third year in ventures now. My third got as far as her first year of Cub Scouts and then retired because they didn't go camping every single week.
Okay.
And my
Well,
fourth
that's a
is
bummer.
I know. It's kind of, I mean, you do what you do. You,
No,
you
I
know,
mean, that's a bummer about not going camping every week.
yeah,
Yeah,
well, it's
that's
tricky though.
upsetting.
Like yeah, there's a logistical aspect there. And don't get me wrong, I'd love to go, but like I
Totally.
burn out my volunteers in about 2 months.
Absolutely. I joke.
Yeah.
Sarcasm doesn't always
Oh,
land
no,
land
no,
very
no.
well, so I
It's
should keep
always
that in
good.
check.
Yeah. Well, no, it's all good.
Um,
It's all good. I get it. But like, and then my fourth is in Cubs. But like, I could think about that, right? Like, I've been doing beaver scoutering, especially for over a decade solid. And well, yeah, you just kind of get used to, um, because, and maybe it's just me and sort of my inherently Murphy's Lawsian nature, but I tend to not like even if I hand a piece of paper to a 5-year-old, I do not trust that that piece of paper is getting home intact or readable.
okay.
Now, I'm
Yeah.
still going to hand them out the paper. I'm absolutely still going to hand them out the paper because this is the list. But you'd better believe that I am also going to be emailing the parents the PDF copy of the same thing that I just handed out.
Because you
And
want to
yes,
set the kid up
it's
for success, right? You don't want someone
right,
showing up without shoes.
right. And it's
So
hopelessly redundant, but at the same time, it's needfully redundant because guess what? Stuff happens. Stuff gets stuffed into a bag or a backpack and then accept as tattered shreds at the end of the year. So, do I want you to have a copy of that same thing? Absolutely. Here, I'll send it to you by email. You can print it at home if you need to.
right. I mean, rather than thinking about, accommodations and accessibility needs as limitations, this sounds maybe like rose tinted glasses, but I've shifted my perception to being like, I need to do all of this stuff and all of this stuff. Even as someone, I have an invisible disability myself, Ken. So, even as someone who's in that space, I've actually shifted my thinking to more, um, I have the privilege to set someone up for success and to give them the opportunity to learn and grow and lead and experience adventure alongside their peers. So I'm going to do everything that I can to remove the barriers that are there, and to work over those challenges with the youth and their families to ensure that everyone has as best of an experience as they possibly can. Um, Sometimes, I'd be foolish to not acknowledge that Scouts Canada hasn't always been that way. Um, and we've still got learning to do. We're not the subject matter experts. Um, and we're learning how to make these adjustments and to, for ceremonies, for very ceremonious activities, where some parts of the uniform are required, but we're now also more aware. We have heightened awareness of youth with sensory issues, like they have sensory challenges and they're not able to wear a necker. Does that mean that they shouldn't participate in their swim up ceremony? Mm. That prospect makes me kind of sad. So I think that we need to be we need to continue to be really flexible about what hills we're gonna stand on and set up camp on, versus like, is that youth not able to wear a necker? They're really not able to. They have a sensory challenge. So let's find a way to include them. And a really easy way to include them is to just encourage their participation without the necker, right? It's not a big deal.
No.
Does that make you feel some kind of way, Ken?
So, I mean, it's interesting you mentioned neckers because, of course, like I'm thinking about it, I go back and forth on like the issue of uniform discipline, and it's funny you mention it. And I mean, if you listen to previous podcast episodes, you probably heard me say this particular line, which is, at the end of the day, um, please do wear your necker. Now,
Yeah.
admittedly, that's usually in the context of multi-group settings, and I can totally understand the utility of the neckerchief in a multi-group setting, right? Because like if I'm a cabaret, say, which is a couple of months ago now, but still, it is help. And I love neckerchiefs, right? Like that's my collector thing, right? I trade
Right.
neckerchiefs like a crazy person.
Cool, cool.
I love my neckerchief collection is huge, and I actually it's one of the things I encourage my youth to trade as well. Um, I've seen people like trade badges. Badges are awesome. I think people can trade uniforms. That's probably a little much. But knickers are cool, right? Because like you meet groups from all around the world, especially well, from all around the country, from all around the province, from all around the city, from all around the world. Whatever your scales, right? And I've been to camps at all of those levels, and it's always great to go to a camp with, say, 10 contingent neckerchiefs and 10 group neckerchiefs and come home with just the contingent neckerchief on my neck and 19 other neckerchiefs that I've traded for, right? And maybe that's just my ADHD talking. I'm kind of, I have the flavor of ADHD that really is big on memory talismans.
That's fair.
I, but I can look through like every one of my neckerchiefs and I can remember like who I traded it with and
If it's, I mean,
how I
we're
hang out with
getting
them.
super
Yeah, but
specific
sorry,
about,
we're getting into the
we're
weeds here.
getting
We're getting
very
into the weeds here.
specific about
But
neckers.
the point
If it's,
is, when we're in multi-group settings,
yeah,
it is helpful to have that instant visual distinction because every
yes,
group kind of has their own neckerchief. It is helpful for me as a scouter to have that instant visual distinction. Okay, that's my youth. That's a different group's youth, and like it's helpful. But at the
yeah,
same
for,
time, I can totally understand. Yeah, if you have some kind of sensory issue and you just really can't wear a neckerchief, we'll deal with that. You know,
does that mean that that youth
and
can't
we'll
go to
make.
that jamboree or whatever? I hope not. Sheesh,
I would hope
that's
not
a
too,
huge opportunity
right?
and experience. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I would hope not too.
Yeah. I mean, when we talk about the uniform too, it makes people feel some kind of way. And I don't mean to, rub anybody wrong,
No,
but
no,
since we're
no.
talking about the uniform and accessibility, when we talk about accessibility, a lot of people think mostly about youth with accommodation needs and different abilities and that sort of thing. But what about like financial accessibility? So again, in that same example of a youth being excluded from a very important ceremony, perhaps because maybe their family can't afford the black shiny shoes that the GC required. Um,
Oh my gosh.
so
Please tell
yeah,
me
I
there are
know.
groups that require shoes.
Some do. Some do require
Dang,
shiny ceremony shoes. So, I
Oof.
encourage folks to think about how accessible that is because, even for families who have a couple of spare dollars, and they can find the black shiny shoes and they can swing it in that month's budget. In today's economy, as a parent, I think I'd rather spend, the $60 or whatever it costs for shiny black shoes on, I don't know, one of my kids' camping supplies that'll improve their camping experiences with scouts. That's where I would rather spend my funding. So there's just something else to consider when it comes to accessibility. And it's a real example, actually. Like this is an instance
Oh my
where
gosh.
a parent was heartbroken and outraged, I think probably rightly so, on behalf of their child who was
Yeah.
denied participation in the swim up ceremony. They showed up to the swim up ceremony and their child didn't have black shiny shoes, so they had to sit at the back. And that just broke my heart. Um, because scouting isn't about how we're dressed, right? When it comes down to it, we're all helping to develop well rounded youth better prepared for success in the world. Sometimes in the world, there are uniform requirements, but um, we're helping to develop youth, right? We don't need to be,
Yeah.
militaristic about it. So,
I mean, oh shoot. I am like, well, I have four thoughts now. And the first is that
okay.
it's a good thing it's a work day and a scouting podcast because otherwise I would need a very stiff drink. But the
Yeah.
second thought,
Yeah.
here's the thing. Like, I mean, I've always thought, God, I thought it was pretentious when, like, I've met some groups where, everybody's idea of the formal uniform had to include, like, the quote unquote official pants. I've always thought
Mm.
that was a little bit pretentious. Myself, you know, I'm like, I mean, our rule in the 59th has always been like, look, to the best of your ability, you have a choice between the uniform, the activity shirt, or any shirt you got at a can. To the best of your
Choices.
ability, try show up in one of these because
Yeah.
at least it's scouting related, right? But I mean, at the end of the day, if you're a new join to my group, or if if you don't have the cash for it, or you've just never been to anything like that, fine. Go up and let you wear to school. Like at the end of the day, show up. That matters more. And I mean, coming back to Neckers for a minute, that's one of the reasons that I actually do harp on Neckers a little bit more maybe than the average
Okay.
bear, you know, because at the end of the day, yeah, I like it if you're wearing, like I say, a uniform shirt or the activity shirt or like a sport shirt out at a scout camp. But, you know, if none of those options are available to you, well, show up in your Necker, right? Because that's the group.
Yeah.
That's our signature on top of that other stuff.
Yeah.
But
But
the
I,
other
I,
other stuff,
I don't know you, Ken, but I have a feeling that you wouldn't turn a youth away
no,
if they
they
showed up
forget their Neckers
without
half
the.
the time. I forget my Neckers half the time,
Yeah. So
right?
the
Or I
flexibility
have
speaks
like 10
volumes.
Neckers, one of the two, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, and
You're not
actually
being
sometimes I
exclusionary.
deliberately show up in not our group's Necker, right? Because I
If anyone
collect so many
notices.
of the darn. Well, actually, it's funny you mention that because our group colors are orange and green. And believe you me, when I went to Candor 100 in 2023, and I saw some of the Irish groups
Oh.
in the airport, like in the baggage carousel,
Mhm.
I was like, I must have orange, green, right?
I
I
must have one.
I
Yeah.
must have one. This is like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, you have like my Necker, but they're inverted, right?
Okay.
Instead of like green with an orange border, it's orange with a green border. Oh,
Yeah.
I brought back like three of those, and periodically I will actually throw them on and just see who notices. Because at the end of the day, it's orange and green, and once the Necker's bound, like once the Necker's folded, you can't really tell which is the border and which is the core color. So
Yeah.
sometimes I'll throw them on just to see who notices. But the other thought that I had, because what I do when I travel is I reach out to scout groups in whatever area I'm going to. And these days for work, I mostly end up in the States.
Mm.
But periodically, I go further abroad, but mostly I end up in the States. And I love hanging out with the BSA troops.
Okay.
And they love having guests because actually one of their badges specifically requires a particular level of interaction with
Oh, I see their
scouts
motive.
or a
Okay.
scouter from another country. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like a both and, right?
Yeah.
And I bring badges to trade and I'll bring necklaces and it's great. Like it's fun for me. It's a win for them. It's a good talk. But, you know, I and it is fair to say because they do have a much closer relationship with the US military than US Canada is with the Canadian military. So they are a little bit more, and I don't use this word in a negative connotation, but they are a little bit more militaristic in their general conduct. But even their uniform discipline for any BSA group, and I've probably met with at least a dozen at this point in my career, um, no BSA group I've ever met, even at like the blue and gold banquet, which is like their big thing where the Cubs all move up to scouts and it's very formal. It's a huge celebration. Man,
Right.
nobody was enforcing shoes. It just really?
Yeah, I mean, to that, I would say like comparison might be the snatcher aware of joy. I think that there's a lot to celebrate
Yes.
in Scouts Canada because some might view it as like, oh, we're lackadaisical, we're too easy, um, we're not even enforcing our uniform policy, which we don't actually have one of those. But BSA, oftentimes folks will compare Scouts Canada to BSA. Specifically to like how well they show up. They look really smart. And yeah, they look really great. But when we think about it, I think Scouts Canada is really a leader in the space of providing some flexibility around the uniform. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I think that our policies are flexible. I think that we're still kind of cultivating the actual intrinsic flexibility amongst us ourselves. But I think that that flexibility means that our diversity is potentially a little bit more broad. We can reach and engage with even more youth because our uniforms are so flexible. So kudos to us. I think that we're doing a really great job. You were
Yeah.
saying something about international travel, and that got me thinking. Is it okay if I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I don't know if you were done with your questions, but
No,
um,
no, no.
in your travels for scouts or otherwise, like, have you seen international jamboree situations where there are accommodations made for some youth, like someone who has got a visible disability or invisible disability? Are you ever aware of those accommodations? What do they look like?
I mean, it's very much, circumstance based, right? Um, if it's, if I mean, I've seen like people in wheelchairs, for example, and like at the end of the day, for good or for ill, most jamborees, most international jamborees that I can think of, like they happen in places that can accommodate a very large number of people, right? Like if I think about going to, Kandersteg International Scout Center is what it is, right? And it has a certain accommodation. But at the end of the day, like it's got the lodges that are there, and then it's got campsites surrounding it. They can accommodate. I think Canada 100 is about 3,000 people in total. I may have the number a little bit wrong, but that's what I have in the head. And most of us were staying under camps, like in a campsite. It's just like essentially gravel roads, dirt paths, that kind of stuff. Right?
Uh-huh.
Good.
Yeah.
Um, but what if you're in a wheelchair? Now, to be fair, when I was at Canada 100, I didn't notice anybody in like the main camp who had significant mobility issues. I think anybody there who had some kind of mobility restriction, whether it's a wheelchair or crutches or whatever, I think they kind of got preferential treatment to stay at the lodges that are at
Okay.
Candersteg,
Yeah.
right? Which that totally makes sense to me, right? Like obviously, yeah, you should be, you should not be wheeling your wheelchair through, yeah, because we got rained on pretty significantly at the events. Yeah, you should not be wheeling your wheelchair through, you know, this dirt path that is now a mud path.
Right.
On, you should absolutely be in the place that's paved and it's like that
Yeah.
seems obvious to me. Now that
Maybe it's
said,
their only
going
building
we're
that's accessible, right?
well, and I think most of the lodges at Camberstein are accessible, right? But
Okay.
whereas like the because it has both, like I say, it has like the lodges where you can get them, but then it also has just like the general campsite, right? Which is like any provincial park here in Canada, right?
Mhm.
The main path is kind of a gravel road going in, and then it's just dirt paths and all the way around. And I mean, that's don't get me wrong, I love that environment for camping in, but I could totally understand that, yeah, if you have significant mobility issues, this is only going to exacerbate. And I actually thinking back to my WSJ 2007, which took place in England, and it was in Highlands Park of England, which,
Mhm.
I mean, there's like a little manor there and like some roads into the site. But at the end of the day, we're not farm fields, really. We're just in a farm field. So again, dirt paths. And I actually remember one particular case where there was somebody, he was in a wheelchair, and there's like 4 or 5 Australian rovers. I remember particularly that they were Aussies. I love, whenever I meet the Australians, I laugh because they are just there to party. Um,
That's good.
but they were basically carrying this guy around like, he was some prince
Yeah.
on one of those oh shoot, what do they call them?
Like
It's
a
just
cot?
reading.
Oh,
Yeah,
like
like
a chaise
just
lounge sort of thing?
yeah, just like, like a prince being carried through the streets of some
Okay.
some far-flung country,
That's
right? Like
inclusion
just
at its best. Did you go to Pacific Jamboree? Because they had other accommodations too, but you can continue on, sorry.
no, 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 no. Sorry, I was just thinking of like how they're just like everybody was just laughing, like they were just having the blast doing this.
Yeah,
But no, what
that's
did they have
fun.
at PJ? I'm curious to know.
Well, like, I I don't mean to, like, steal the topic away, but I love
Oh
the
no,
the picturing someone being included to the point of, I don't know, being the focus and the
it
priority.
was their king. It
Um,
was
I love
hilarious. It was
that.
awesome.
Yeah. So for PJ 2024, there was the CareCore mental health team, and they're they were really intentional about making a quiet area with some self-regulation tools for youth to access, and also probably folks like me. If I had gone there, I would need a little bit of quiet space too, um, to regulate myself and to bring them back to a good mental health space where they can go back and participate with their troop. But like that's another way that, accommodations and accessibility can be made. You can be really thoughtful and um intentional about creating space because someone who might need help with, self-regulation. Imagine going to PJ. There's how many youth were there? A couple of thousand? I don't know. I think it
Couple
was
thousand at least.
maybe it might
Yeah,
yeah, so, like, it was like a little town had popped up in BC, right? And imagine being a
absolutely.
youth and not being able to or at least being challenged by self-regulation, and then to see a special dedicated spot just for you with things that you need. You need to go in, it needs to be a little bit darker in there, really quiet, really relaxing, maybe some fidget toys to kind of get some of that energy out. And imagine how welcoming that might feel to be like, yeah, Scouts Canada's got my back. They planned for me to be here. They welcome me to be here. And this is an example of that. So, like to circle back to the Australian Scouts at Canada Day carrying their buddy. I'm sure that that buddy felt included and didn't doubt for 1 second that there would be plans to include them in whatever the day may bring. So,
Yeah.
um,
Well, and
yeah.
I think too, we can kind of synthesize this down to two different things that are like simultaneously important. And from a maybe 30,000 foot view, they might seem opposed in some way, but they're really not. Which is to say that, it's it's really important to be able to have the pre-planned accommodations, like what you're talking about at PJ, right? Where there is that
Mhm,
special area, which again, from like that was part of the plan from the get-go. And it's like a
mhm.
designated area where you can go, where you can decompress, and it's there for you. And then at the same time, there's these ad hoc spur of the moment things like, you know,
Absolutely.
4 large Australian rovers deciding to carry their buddy like a king
Yeah,
through a particularly muddy patch, right? Like it's just and it's a both and kind of thing, right? Where it's like, yeah, absolutely. In the moment, you need to be able to just, oh, okay, yeah, we got to deal with this. Well, let's find a way to deal with it. With just the
absolutely.
handful of us that are here, but then also, yeah, to have those pre-planned accommodators. It's like, hey, if you need this, here is that. If you
Yeah.
need this, go here. Those are
There's
both excellent things to have.
I love to be prepared, but like you said, there are some things that you just can't prepare for. And the sense of an ability to be resilient and adaptable. I think that scouts are really great at that too. Scouters, youth, we're all really great at rising to the challenge and adjusting as needed. And specifically when it comes to the inclusion of youth with exceptionalities, they learn differently. Sometimes they get around physically differently. There's different accommodations that can be made on a moment's notice, and sometimes we can be a little bit more thoughtful. But the flexibility there speaks volumes to our ability to do that.
Yeah. Well, it's funny when they should being compared. Have you ever heard the the response that is attributed to Baden Powell when a reporter actually asked him? It's like, well, what are scouts being prepared for?
I haven't heard this.
And it was a very pithy response too. But this reporter was like, well, you say that the motto of the scouts is to be prepared. What are they preparing for? And Baden Powell just kind of laconically replied, "Why, for any old thing." Uh,
This is true.
it's more, and it's exactly what you said, right? It's that sense of like the resiliency and the adaptability, right? It's not. I mean, yes, it's good to run through specific scenarios and to prepare for. It's like if you're going camping, you obviously like bring a raincoat, bring extra socks, like all of the usual stuff that you would do. But then also, it really is that mental model of just like, well, you know, whatever happens, we're gonna find a way to roll with it.
Yeah, I mean, the youth of the early 1900s certainly had different things to be prepared for than the youth of 2026. And I think we're doing really well at keeping up with the times, and we're doing a really great job of acknowledging um, the different needs of all the youth, from coast to coast to coast, and how we can set them up for success. And I mean, I think it's like I said, it's our privilege really to set youth up to be prepared to be resilient and inclusive and accommodating, and also to workshop these challenges that face us. But working together and including folks and maybe doing things a little bit differently or with a little bit more flexibility or patience. Flexibility is a good skill to have because things don't
Yeah.
always go as planned. So teaching
Well, and
resilience.
it got me thinking too, like, because, and I mean, this kind of relates back to, what I was rambling about with like the venture company at the start of it all, because at the end of the day, again, do I expect the general case, you know, and this is the other problem too in a lot of these sorts of discussions is you can talk about like what, you know, you'll have some people talking about sort of the general case or the average, but then there are always exceptions, right? And you'll have some people who are just talking in the general, some people who overfocus on the general case, some people who overfocus on the exceptions, and it can derail the discussion very, very quickly. But like I said at this kind of at the outset, right? Like in the general case, yeah, venture scouts. If I'm dealing with 14 to 17-year-olds, I would expect in the general case that even a new vet could at least be starting to develop some skill for independence because that is part of that maturation process, right? We want children to transition to being adults. And part of that is developing a sense of independence. And in a lot of ways, the venture program is there to foster that development and to foster that independence, to actually like give them some ability to decide and plan their own itinerary, to decide and plan their own budget. But obviously,
Absolutely.
if there are youth who have very particular struggles, then we should intervene to help out. But in the general case, we're really just there to, ask the question, like, well, okay, you could do that, but have you thought of this?
I might
Right? We're
actually
there
even
more for
challenge that though,
suggestions,
Ken. I
facilitation.
I might
But sure.
challenge that because events, I mean, at that age, I think that scouters have done a really great job, and also the University of Life has done a great job. Um, Youth are really acutely aware of their peers and what their peers need in order to be successful. And I think that that would also be included in their plans. Um, they would take others into consideration in their plans. And if there needs to be accommodations, chances are I would bet you a necker that the ventures would have planned for accommodations of other youth who have accessibility needs. I
Oh, send me a mailing address because I already know that that's true.
will do, will do.
Yeah, seriously,
Um,
I have some scouting stuff now because I'll send you one.
oh,
Um,
Lord.
no, you already won that bill, and that's exactly true, right? Like the youth are very, but I mean, even with like new youth coming in, right? Although I shouldn't say new youth because at the end of the day, you don't get to having 36 venturers without a lot of retention. And actually, I was talking to my daughter, who is, I think it's her third year in venture race now. Was talking to her last night, and about the subject of like splitting companies. And she's like, well, but if we split companies, like there's a lot of the guys coming up from scouts that I like and would want to hang out with. So, right, like they all know each other, right?
Mhm.
And they've known each other for a long time.
Yeah.
But yeah, like they know each other. They know where each other is at, like you say, right? Like they can factor that into their plans. That said, we as scouters, advisors should be cognizant of the fact that, okay, we have this youth, we have all these youth coming in, and these youth in particular, let's be mindful of these things. But it also, the broader point that I was kind of building to there was that, okay, it's fine to have that conversation in ventures, but I mean, you, we as scouters do have to kind of tailor it for whatever age level we're dealing with. The one example I fall on, funnily enough, is board games. When my oldest two were in beavers, my eldest was a white tail, my second was a brown tail, and that was the year when. And I mean, again, Canadian path, we're supposed to be youth led, but what that looks like at different sections changes, right? Like
Absolutely.
youth led for. I mean, youth led was always what Venturers and Rovers was supposed to be, anyways. Um, that didn't change much. Maybe the youth led for beavers, well, that looks very different. And we had this one meeting where we sat down and, in our interpretation of youth led, we were just like, well, let's collect ideas for individuals of things they would like to do. And we will, you know, build program around that for the rest of the meeting. And this
Mhm.
one kid put his hand up and is just like, oh, let's design a board game. Dang, kid.
Okay.
Okay, let's figure that out. And we did. And I mean, I had some contacts in the gaming industry. So we actually had like three designers from BioWare, video game company, come out, do a presentation for the meeting. Um,
How
and I mean,
cool.
oh, it was so awesome. And like they did, and I mean, none of it was funny because they were like three single guys. None of them had kids, but they all kind of recognized the audience. And so they did like just a quick 15-minute discussion of like, okay,
Mhm.
here's what a game actually is. And they broke it down into like different components and concepts. And then we just rolled out massive sheets of paper. The kids had markers and they basically just went nuts. And
Okay.
like they designed a game.
So, like, even those developers sound to have been very accommodating to their audience. They
Yeah.
knew that, like, coding and perhaps the shop talk of artistry and concept design wouldn't really land very well with
Mhm.
beavers. I know that beaver meetings can be a bit like herding cats sometimes. So, kudos to
Oh
those
my
developers
gosh.
for adjusting and accommodating to a group of beavers. That's amazing.
Yeah. And the beavers actually like did wind up developing like, and we had two colonies at the time. So they came out one night and then the next night. Um, and the beavers wound up like I actually spent like all of Lent taking the scribbles and sketches from the papers. And I spent like every free hour I had in like Photoshop. And I actually like found like a little bespoke printing service. So all the beavers that year got a physical copy of the game they designed
Aw,
with
good
nicer
job,
artwork
Ken.
and so. Oh, I mean, part of that was a fit of pique on my part because it's like, oh well, the Beavers don't need a huge bunch. Watch me,
Yeah,
just
watch
watch me.
this. Yeah, hold my coffee.
But
Um,
but it's
totally.
funny because like I've tried a couple of times since then to recreate to recapture that lightning in a bottle, but it really was lightning in a bottle. That one group of beavers that I had were the right mix of like imaginative and focused and collaborative that they could actually like pull that off.
The
And I've
activity
tried it
really
a
played
couple
to
of
their
times.
strengths.
It did. And I've tried a
Yeah.
couple of times since, and it just hasn't landed the same way. And so, I mean, that's been a lesson for me too. It's just that, like, okay, you really, really do have to, if you're serious about this, you really, really do have to be able to like read your kids,
Yeah.
to read your section and figure out, like, hey, are these the sort of kids that I can do this or that or the other kind of activity with?
Yeah.
And if they are, great. And if they're not, then you need to be able to shift and pivot.
Totally. And I mean, that's a really powerful point that you're making that like accommodations and accessibility isn't always about youth with disabilities or youth with accessibility needs. It's about supporting youth to really participate meaningfully. And in a way that supports them to grow, and to really leverage their strengths and what they're good at. So it's not so much to focus on challenges or limitations, but it's how can we adjust programming to suit the needs, and abilities of the youth that we have, right? That are in the
Yeah.
programming. So, yeah.
Well, in a lot of ways too, it's about letting go of your own ego as a scouter, right?
Yeah,
Because I
this
mean,
is true.
obviously, like I mentioned earlier, I started as a beaver at 5. I never really left. And I've seen the program go. So, I mean, when was I 5 years old? Like late 1980s, right? Like, has the program changed since then? Yes. Have I seen most of those changes happen in real time? Yes.
Mhm.
Have I been through some stuff? Yes. But even if there are times where within the group, I'm the person that you can kind of count on to, you know, say, well, historically, this has been the approach, or, we tried that before and this was the result. Because I just, I have that long memory of the group having lived through it all. Um, there does, you just kind of, you have to, you have to be able to detach your own ego from it. I certainly have a particular vision of scouting, or I thought I did. And it's cool to me to see, to see elegance of that when they happen. But at the same time, you know, to be able to remind myself that, hey, that thing that we did that one time, maybe that was just a one time thing. That thing that we did when I was a youth, maybe that was just for me. These
Yeah.
youth are different. And you really just have to be able to let go of ego and of history and of
How
I
things
mean,
have been
picking your
done.
battles, right? Pick your
Yeah.
ramparts, right? What hill do you want to die at? Whatever your metaphor is,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you kind of, and I mean, there are arguments to be made, but, yeah, okay, this is something that we should be a little bit more, you know, this is a place where it's okay to, set a stricter expectation.
Mhm.
And then this is a place where, yeah, we can let that slide,
Yeah,
right?
we can take a modern approach to it, right? As a fellow 1900s kid myself, just because I experienced a scraped knee as a Girl Scout doesn't necessarily mean that every other youth in scouting must experience a pretty gnarly scraped knee in order to get the full experience of scouting, right? Um,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be that way.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's right. And so at the end of the day, like, coming back to your shiny shoes thing, right? Like, just that's where you need to let your ego go, right? Because, and I mean, I guess it's sort of that question of like, what's the harm? Who is being harmed about this? That's
Yeah.
actually a pretty good question to ask. And sometimes there is actually an answer to that question. It's like, oh, okay, if we do this, then these are the harms that flow from it. And okay, well, geez, we got to take those into account then.
Mhm.
But, when it's something like, oh, okay, so your son struggles to wear scarves or things around his neck and even like the high collared shirt bothers him, fine, fine. Not gonna, I'll hand him his necker, right? Like I won't put it around his neck. I'll just hand it to him. And, you can put it on his bedroom wall. If you need inspiration ideas, I'll send you a photo of my second daughter's room because she has so many neckers hanging from her wall right now.
Some apples
Um,
don't fall far from the tree.
Yeah,
Um,
oh my gosh, she is a consummate trader. She really is. It's hilarious, right? But like
mm,
that exactly. Just you want the youth to show, and you want the youth to keep showing up, and you want the youth to keep coming back year over year. That's the only goal. We're here for the kids. We want them to come back. 36 Venturer Scouts.
that's a
I
lot.
didn't get. You don't get that by being a stick in the mud. You
This is
don't get
true.
that by being, well, there's only one way to do scouting and it's my way. And no, just
They
leave
didn't
your
stick
ego at
around for your
home.
ego pin. I'm glad.
Yeah,
I like
right. Like
that's
just,
yeah.
I mean, uh, my ultimate goal, like, my only goal going in as a scouter was because at the end of the day, like I was bullied in school a lot. I didn't have a ton of friends in school, and the friends I have today, my lifelong friendships came out of the scouting movement. And even if my kids found friends elsewhere, found lasting friendship elsewhere, all I wanted for them was the same opportunity to find their people. And if I've somehow in the course of that enabled 36 teenagers to find their people, great.
Job well
Like,
done, Ken.
you're
That was a
winning.
good
You're
job. Yeah,
winning, right? Like,
crushing
if
it.
if you make that happen in your group, you're winning. And
Yeah,
you don't even realize how much you're winning.
right.
And so, yeah, like, but you don't get that way by being one size fits all. You don't get that way by being one way or the highway.
Thanks for saying that. That makes me feel kind of marshmallowy and gooey.
Hmm.
I do have to log off pretty lickety
Yes.
split here to join my family.
Okay. No worries.
But it's been a real pleasure, Ken. You do a good job in Scouts Canada and the youth who are near to you. Like you're an asset for certain.
Well, thank you. And
Yeah.
I'm sure the same is true for you as well. Do you do any troop level involvements or are you just with national?
So I started as a volunteer at the beginning of last scouting year. I had been looking for a couple of years, and maybe it's that like, oh, she's from national. We don't really want her to be a volunteer. But I had been applying to some groups for about 2 years prior to being accepted to First Stittsville last year. And I joined at the group committee level. So I helped with fundraising, community outreach, making business connections in the community, getting sponsors, that sort of thing. So I was involved at the group level. I did attend, group meetings, that sort of thing.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank
yeah.
you for your time, Steph. This is a great topic. We'll have to touch base after I get back from vacation because I think there's more to discuss there. I don't know. Conflict is a big thing.
Yeah.
But
I hope it doesn't make you feel icky. But
no.
enjoy your vacation. Bon voyage if you're traveling. Travel safely.
This is as far as British Columbia, not that far.
Okay. Still, be safe. That's all.
Brilliant. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you out there for listening. And until next time, be prepared.